Hello, people. Hope you're all well. I know it's been a little bit of time waiting for the next episode of Sit Down with Sanderson, but I'm sure you're going to absolutely love this one. Joined by one of the best reporters in all of MMA. Sit back, relax. We're here with Farah. Let's do this. Hi, Farah. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you so much for joining me on Sit Down with Sanderson. It's a real honor, real pleasure. Follow a lot of the interviews you do, and you are literally one of the best in the game. So it's a massive honor for me. So thank you so much for doing this.
No, pleasure's all mine. I appreciate that.
Right. So about yourself, you are a reporter for MMA Junkie and for USA Today. But I have to address the elephant in the room. I'm a football fan. I saw in your Twitter bio, Hala Madrid. Talk to me about Real Madrid. Not at the best of seasons. I'm a Liverpool fan, so I hold a lot of malice towards your club because you seem to stop us winning the Champions League every time we play each other. However, how did you become a Real Madrid fan, and how big is your love for the Madrid?
First of all, timely question right after that thrashing against Man City. So,
we've been there as well.
Yeah, I've been football is kind of like I call it football, not soccer. First of all, I'm sure you call it that too. It's kind of the first sport I started playing. So I used to watch it a lot when I was younger, and then I kind of stopped watching for years, and then I got back into it. So I'd say I can't remember, maybe like avidly, maybe like 2012 or something like that, if I'm being honest, in terms of Real Madrid. But yeah, I mean, it has been fun because obviously a lot of people hate Real Madrid, but it's been fun because a lot of Champions Leagues that they've won that maybe people didn't think they should have won, or they love to blame it on VAR or whatnot. But it's been fun to be a Madrid fan. I'm not going to lie; they've been won a lot of unexpected football games and just a lot of crazy moments, from Ramos's header to Ronaldo helping them come back from down against Wolfsburg when they won 3-2, that hat trick. Just so many cool moments as a Real Madrid fan. So I can't complain after this thrashing. I think I've gotten to enjoy a lot of good moments. So yeah.
It's all right for some. I mean, I'm thinking back now, 17, 18, 2021, last season and this season, you've knocked Liverpool out of the Champions League. So if any Real Madrid players or the managers watching, please just let us get one over you, because it's really painful at this point. But speaking about getting one over, MMA, constantly evolving, constantly changing. You are one of the best reporters, interviewers in the game, and I don't say that lightly. I've spoken to other journalists and they say the same about you as well. What is the first MMA event you actually attended, though? Or
actually,
watched?
Yeah, I mean, before I became a journalist, I had only really watched one, which was 2016 Silva Bisping in London. So that was I had planned to go to so many UFC events, and that's the only one I ended up going to. But it was, and I remember that wasn't the original main event. It was supposed to be Mousasi Bisping, and then there was a shuffle, and I think it was after it was sold out that they had announced Silva was gonna fight Bisping. So I was super excited because Anderson Silva is one of the reasons why I got into the sport. So when that was announced, I was, and at that point I wasn't a reporter, but I was like kind of like I had the Instagram page I was running, and I was kind of just seeing where I was going to go with it at that time. So I wasn't like a full on journalist or reporter or anything, but it was really cool to watch that fight in particular because it turned out to be a really good one.
That's pretty incredible, actually, because again, I live in London, growing up in London, and I know the events in London, in England, the atmosphere is second to none. And I might be a bit biased saying that I've seen the French crowd, I've seen the Australian crowd, obviously the Irish crowd in Dublin, they're all phenomenal. But there's something special about going to the UK and coming to England. So for that to be your first event, and for it to be Bisping versus Silva as well, a fight that was back and forth, a fight that we thought Silva had won at one stage, and then Bisping rallied to get the victory. Truly brilliant. Would you say that's up there with one of the best events you've actually been to, though?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, it's a different feel when you're watching it as a fan as opposed to covering it, because you have to focus a little bit in a different way when you're covering it, because whether it's play by play or you're writing something, it's like a
Mm,
different, you don't get to enjoy it, I guess, as much. But yeah, definitely, because even when Silva had tagged him with that knee, you can't hear the commentary. So when I rewatched it, the commentary kind of clarified it pretty quickly. When I was there, it was a whole different story. It took me forever to understand what was happening. So it was pretty sure. I think somebody had taken a picture of me. They could see me kind of behind the cage with my mouth wide open, and they sent it to me. And that was kind of my reaction to. I don't know if I was after the knee had landed or me finding out that it wasn't over, but that kind of perfectly described how I felt there.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I do watch along both for football and for UFC events. And even though I enjoy them at the time, it's true, when you're covering it, it's a different sensation. So I always go back and watch, especially UFC events, because one, when you're doing a watch along, you can't listen to the commentary, so you can't soak in the atmosphere that's at the arena as well. So when you're doing the watch along, and or in your case when you're reporting, do you almost find that you can't fully immerse yourself into it until you've actually finished the event and maybe rewatched it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And even sometimes when I'm like covering it as a reporter, as not just watching it, it's hard to, like, especially if it's a close fight, it's hard to tell who won, because especially when you're watching it through a cage, it's tough to gauge sometimes like what you're watching. When I rewatch it, that's why sometimes when people ask me like who do you think won, I say whoever, and then but I say I have to rewatch it to make sure that I stick by that decision, because it's hard to, like, when you're watching it behind the cage, you can't exactly see what's going on. So it's different. You soak in the atmosphere, like you said, but it's also a lot easier when you're watching it from home to actually fully understand what's happening in the fight. But obviously, like, when you're there, you get to experience kind of the crowd. And you talked about the UK crowd; they are amazing. I've gotten to go to numerous fight nights now in London, and yeah, it's nothing like it. They're there early on, and they're cheering for their guys and girls. They're definitely it's definitely an incredible atmosphere.
Yeah, completely agree. So I've got to look at one of your most famous moments, and that's when you're interviewing Conor McGregor. I think this is in the lead up to Dustin Poirier 2, and then he looks out the window and spots Max Holloway skateboarding. Now, obviously, a former opponent of his, they've had their back and forth, but I believe they have great amount of respect for each other. One, what's it like interviewing Conor McGregor? And two, what was that moment like when he completely goes left field and starts speaking about something I know you could never have prepared for?
What's funny about that, so I was one of the last people to interview Connor, and he had done a lot of media leading up to that fight. And you get asked a lot of the same questions, and it's hard not to repeat those questions, because well, first of all, one thing I try not to do is watch other people's interviews. And the reason I do that is because subconsciously I don't want to follow a similar script. So I tend to avoid doing that. Now, it's inevitable you're going to ask similar questions. Like if 10 or 12 or 15 people are all interviewing Connor in the span of 2 days where nothing really happens. Plus, we were in a bubble as well. So it wasn't one of those things where something could happen within 48 hours, because MMA is pretty crazy. Things can happen. But in that particular case, we were in a bubble. So nothing was going to happen from when he spoke to X, Y, and Z and myself. So I knew I was going to end up repeating a lot of the questions. So when that Max Holloway moment happened, it was almost perfect, because I'm like, that is what differentiated my interview from everybody else. So he had already said what he had to say, whether it was about Habib or Dustin, and he was being the respectful Connor as well at that in that period of time. So wasn't going to get those like nice headlines out of him or anything like that. So when that moment happened, and the cool part about that moment, so I had interviewed Max a week before, because he had fought a week before in Abu Dhabi as well. And in that particular interview with Max, the camera crew took forever to set up, and it kind of put me in a bit of an awkward situation, because I had to, like, Max was, the weight cut is pretty heavy on him, so he was like zoned out. He was like staring right into nothing. So I'm like, crap, like I need to, talk to him and just get him like just get him a bit like, like into it. So I started talking to Max, and I just like, I don't know, I was just making small talk. I don't know him personally. That was the first time I met him. So I was just like, what's it been like at the bubble? I just asked a very generic question. I just said, um, are you the kind of guy during fight week that likes to go out a lot? And if so, is this kind of hard for you? And then he goes, yeah, I am. And he's like, but I have my skateboard with me. And the fighter hotel over there was like a ramp. So he's like, it's been nice. They allowed them to kind of go up and down the ramp, because that bubble was different than the bubble in 2020 for Habib Gaethje. Because Habib Gaethje, we were allowed to walk around kind of Yas Island. This one, you couldn't walk anywhere. So from the hotel was into the bus, into your own hotel. You couldn't actually walk around anywhere. So that's why I had asked him that question. And he mentioned the skateboard, which is why when the Conor thing happened, I handled it so well. I wasn't confused, because I'm like, yeah, I know Max has been skating. So it kind of weirdly all worked out perfectly.
Amazing. So I've got to ask then, is that your favorite interview so far, that particular interview, or do you have another one?
I mean, that would probably be my favorite moment, I would say. Maybe not overall interview, just because, like I said, I felt like at that point Conor had done so much media, so I didn't. It didn't feel like my best. But actually, I like the one I did with Habib before he fought Gaethje. I thought that was one of the better ones I've done, just because obviously we didn't know that he was going to retire after, but it was a very emotional week for him, and he just had a lot of kind of cold one-liners. There's one particular one that I asked him, I think, about both Conor and Dustin, something to do with rematches, and he said why I finished them. But the way he responded, I can't remember what he said, but he just had a lot of like cold one-liners. So I enjoyed that one. I think Hamza in the lead up to 267 was also a good one. Adesanya 253. I don't know if it was after the weigh-ins or one that was before the fight, but there were a couple ones like that were good. But it depends on the fighter as well. Of course, some fighters will typically give a lot of people good interviews. So those who kind of have those zingers or one-liners or whatever, those tend to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think one thing that you bring to life is the human side of a fighter, and I don't think that's easy, especially when they're going through weight cutting and post-fight or pre-fight nerves and everything else that comes into it. Do you notice the significant difference between someone who's cutting weight and someone who posts the weigh-in when you're interviewing someone?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. So one thing I used to do when I was covering those events in Abu Dhabi, I was doing 3 different kinds of interviews. I was going from sit downs to post weigh-ins to post fight, and it's 3 completely different vibes, because post weigh-ins, they just want to get out. I'm the last person they want to see. They're completely dehydrated. They want to go hydrate. They don't want to talk to me. So that one, it has to be quick, and it has to be short, and it has to be to the point, and it has to be. And some of them I had already spoken to like 1 or 2 days ago. So it's got to be different. If I'm lucky, and like Adesanya had that face off with Paulo Costa with the white belt, that's easy. That's easy thought. Brian Ortega came with a shaved head. That was like something people wanted to know about. But if it's like nothing happened in the span of like 24 hours and stuff, you want it to be like quick to the point, maybe a prediction. You ask them about the face off if it was heated. So that's different, because you know they want to go. So you don't want to hold them for 5 to 6 minutes, even if you have so many questions to ask, because you know they just want to get out. In the sit down, they're a lot more comfortable. They know they've got a lot of like media obligations, so you get a different vibe. And then post fight, it depends. Like I remember talking to Gaethje when he lost to Habib, and I really appreciated him giving me the time in the first place. That was hard, because you have to be very sensitive to someone who is just heartbroken from a loss. So completely different vibes depending on when you speak to them.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you've obviously named quite a few fighters there that you've interviewed. Who has been your favorite person to interview so far, and why?
So it's tough, because some of them I've only gotten to interview once. Some of them I've gone to interview multiple times. But I have to say Adesanya is always one that I've enjoyed a lot, because he keeps you on your toes as well. You can't, if you say something wrong or something that he doesn't like or something that's incorrect factually, like he'll put you on the spot, and I like that, because he keeps me on my toes. So I like speaking to Adesanya, because I find him pretty like clever, and I know he avidly follows the sport. Volkanovski is another one that I enjoy speaking to as well. He has a lot of insight. Hamza was always a lot of fun, because even though he won't like sometimes properly answer your questions, most like I'll smash everybody and whatnot. But he's fun, because I've followed Hamza for a very long time, even pre-UFC. So any chance that I would get to speak to him would always be fun. Habib was great when I sat down with him. That was the one and only time. And obviously Conor was as well. That was the one and only time as well. So yeah, I think those probably would be my favorites.
Yes, Absolutely brilliant. All right, we talk about the fighters' pre-fight nerves. What about your nerves? Because again, I interview people, and I'm not going to lie, there are times I get nervous before I interview people. You're interviewing some of the greatest athletes to touch the world and performing at the world stage. Which interview have you been the most nervous before, and how did you handle those nerves?
I think Habib. I don't know why, because there was something. It was an emotional fight week for him, so I
Mm.
was kind of playing it in my head, like, should I ask this? Should I ask that? And I tend not to over prepare for interviews, and the simple reason why is because I try to keep it conversational. Now, the good thing about that is that sometimes I succeed. Not, don't get me wrong. If I have no clue who the fighter is, and it happens, sometimes you'll interview someone you've heard of, but you don't know anything. Of course, I'm going to pay them that respect by doing the research. I'm not going to go ask just generic questions. But if it's someone I'm very familiar with, where we all know everything about them anyway, just because they're one of the main like stars or like athletes in the sport, I try to make it as conversational as possible. So I try not to like overthink. Sometimes you'll end up forgetting to ask something really important, and I'll realize after, I'll be like, crap, how did I forget that? So it's like a good and bad thing. But yeah, Habib, something about that, and he walked in with like 100 people behind him or something. I'm like, why are all these people here? So like, why?
I've heard about his entourages.
And you're all just standing there. Like, I try not to look at them, but they were all like, "Oh, why are you standing there? Why don't you just go sit down until he finishes?" But yeah, so yeah, that only because it was such an emotional fight week for him. But he was great. I really enjoyed that interview with him. I thought he like gave me some great answers.
Yeah, I mean, again, watching your interviews as they happened, watching your interview since then, in preparation to this interview as well, you handle it really well, and it can't be easy speaking with these people. But one person I do want to speak to you about is someone who seems to have a love-hate relationship with the media, and that is the UFC president Dana White. However, every time you seem to interview him, he seems to be absolutely cool. So, for anyone like who has a problem with Dana White and stuff, what's your advice for them? Because you seem to just have it spot on every single time.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, typically my like I sometimes I'll obviously people will criticize certain members of the media. Let's say you're throwing softball questions or not giving the hard hitting stuff, and that's fine by me. Like, I believe there's space for everybody in this industry. So sometimes my line of questioning is not going to be somebody's favorite, but I generally try not to ruffle feathers. Sometimes fighters or will get upset at me. Trust me, like, there's a lot of people in this industry that have gotten upset at me, but I just don't publicize these quote unquote beefs. You know what I mean? I try to keep things privately, for the simple reason I don't like getting attention in that way. And I'm not like throwing digs at anybody. Like, everybody does their thing. Everybody, like, the great thing about this is that we all have a platform and we all get to represent ourselves the way we want to. So and that goes back to me not being crazy active on Twitter. I'm guilty of that sometimes, because I'm not, like, I check Twitter all the time, but I'm not actively tweeting all the time, and I'm not engaging or think. Like, sometimes people will think out loud and they'll tweet something that's in their mind. I'm not that kind of person. So I tend to try to get my subject, whoever it is, comfortable. And generally speaking, that will, if I'm making them comfortable, that will make them happy with me, because I try to ease my way into what I want to ask sometimes that they may not like. So I've had, I remember it was a question I had asked. I'm trying to remember what it was. Something to do with healthcare. And someone, like, Dana was doing a Q&A, and someone asked him about healthcare, and he said, we're working on it. Or I can't remember what he answered. So I asked him about it. And then he said something like, did I say that? And I said, yeah. And he said, no, that was a mistake, or I responded to the wrong tweet. So I kind of laughed. Like, I tend to smile a lot. It's just my nature. And I remember Chris Cyborg put me on blast for that. Yeah. And then a lot of people came after me in my DMs and stuff. And then someone's like, I can't believe you asked him that. So sometimes it's probably like, for me, it was like, it was normal to ask, but then sometimes you see what I mean? So I think people have a different perception of what they would and wouldn't ask. But I just try to do me. It's not going to be for everybody. It's always like that. So I just believe there's space for everybody in this industry. I don't have a problem with the way anybody approaches anything. It's your platform. It's the way you want to kind of present your line of questioning. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know what it is. I just try to ask the questions that people want to hear, like the updates on different fighters and stuff. And sometimes you have to ask the other stuff that they may not be happy about. But I don't know. I guess it depends. you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, basically.
Yeah. Again, that's something I found from the football side of stuff that I do is it's very divisive. And MMA, in my opinion, is probably the other sport, maybe alongside boxing as well. But MMA is really divisive. You either get people who love you or hate you. There's very few people that sort of sit on the fence. And you look at some of the other journalists, I won't name them by name, who have a really bad relationship with Dana White, but they're almost seen as an anti-hero. And then you look at people like yourself who do not necessarily ask questions to ruffle feathers, and people then criticize you and say, oh, should have asked this, should have asked that. Ultimately, as you said, there is a space for everyone. And if you don't like that person's questions, or you feel as though you want to find out more information, maybe someone else is going to ask those questions. So just do a little bit of research. But how have you dealt with people trolling and criticizing? Because it is something we deal with in this space as content creators. I'll be honest, I still find it difficult sometimes to hear some of the criticisms, but how have you found it? And I hate to ask it, but being a woman in and around the sport as well, you see some of the stupid people, some of the stupid things people tweet and how stupid some people can be. Has that been a barrier that you've had to work even harder to break down as well?
I mean, yeah, to be honest, like I feel it more not when I'm interviewing, but when I'm giving my opinion. So if I'm giving my opinion on not necessarily like breaking down a fight, but just a topic within the sport, the whole being a female comes in like more than it ever has. Because in the beginning, I would do a lot of just interviewing, and then we do this show at MMA Junkie called Spinning Backlick, where we give our opinions on like kind of different topics. That is when I face, because people used to ask me that question all the time, and I would respond to it in a way where I deal with a lot in terms of being halfway across the world, the reverse time zone, all of that. That, you know, being a female is weirdly the least of my worries type of thing, because there's a lot I had to deal with. But I noticed that doing that show in particular and just giving my opinion on different hot topics, whether it's power slap or Francis Ngannou free agency or whatever it is, that's when people jump in, and it gets pretty aggressive. So it's not nice. Nobody, like, it's hard for anyone to deal with, but sadly you kind of get used to it, where certain insults become like, okay, that's all they're gonna say, good. Like I'll take that. Like it's become like degrees of insults, where certain ones that used to like upset me a little bit, I'd be happy when I see those. I'm like, okay, if that's as bad as it's gonna get, that's great. So it's kind of almost become like that. But you just have to have kind of thick skin. It sucks. It's never nice to read these things, like especially that people people get pretty nasty and pretty personal on DMs. I get that quite a bit, but I get whatever. Like there's nothing you can do. It sucks, but it just comes with it comes with the territory.
Yeah, it is a real shame, and hopefully the powers that be with social media, they do something about that one day. I'm not going to ask you about the slap league, because I think that just splits everyone's opinion. But I will briefly ask you on Ngannou, who you just mentioned. Obviously, news broke last week about his PFL deal and the subsequent other things, such as the boxing and him being a chairman of PFL Africa and things like that. Covering from Francis winning against Cyril Gane to him signing the deal and everything that happened in between, where did you sit with everything? Because obviously UFC is the big show. It's the WWE of MMA. So it feels weird for us fans to imagine someone who is Francis Ngannou, the champion of the heavyweight division, going somewhere during his peak. But how did you sort of see it? How did you see it as it was unfolding? And ultimately, what do you think of Francis still and the one he's managed to strike with the PFL?
So I have like I think of it in two ways. In terms of, it's because he happens to be a heavyweight, and the heavyweight division generally is pretty shallow regardless in MMA, and especially shallow in other organizations. It's kind of disappointing because he had reached the point after the knockout of Stipe, and then obviously with Gane, his knee was messed up, but showing us the new wrinkle to his game. I know he showed it a little bit against Stipe defensively, but showing it offensively as well. You almost wanted to see where he was going to go. And of course, he has that ultimate equalizer. So as a fan of the sport, it's disappointing that we didn't get to see the Jon Jones fight. But in another, like, he is, I don't know how old he is right now, 35, 36. It's not like he's got...
I think.
36. Who knows how he's going to come back from his knee injury? He's always wanted to box. I spoke to Francis a lot in his come up. I got to interview him a lot. He always talked about boxing. And I remember there was an interview I did with Ngannou. I had posted it on my Instagram. I think, I can't remember which year it was, but it was a few years ago. And one particular notable journalist, I won't name him, but he ridiculed me even asking him about Tyson Fury. Because he's like, what on earth is this? And now look, it doesn't seem so ridiculous because Fury's going back and forth with Jon Jones now, who's not somebody who we typically would have thought in boxing. So he's always talked about boxing. He's always wanted to box. It's something that he's always wanted to do. So when you think about it in that regard and him fighting for certain things and then the PFL Africa, good for him. If he's happy, that's the most important thing. Selfishly, in terms of being a fan, I would have loved to see him fight Jon Jones, and I feel like the toughest competition. Then you see Sergey Pavlovich in the come up, and that's exciting. I know a lot of people are going to be like, he's unproven, but obviously the knockout against Blades was great for him. Yeah. There was just a lot more exciting fights. I don't know who he can fight at PFL that's going to get me excited, and that's no disrespect to any of the heavyweights there. So selfishly, in terms of just being a fan and watching, I feel like we were robbed of a couple of amazing fights that he could have had. Not that there were a million out there for him. That's the point. That's why it would have been nice to see the Jones, and then maybe if Pavlovich fought somebody and knocked that person out as well, Pavlovich. But in terms of him, if he's happy and those are the things he wants and that's what he believes in, especially the part about boxing and how badly he wanted to do it, good for him. Like at the end of the day, it's his life, it's his career. If he's happy, ultimately, that's all that's important.
Yeah, completely agree. Again, I'm like you, a fan of the sport. Him versus Jones is such a mouth-watering fight. But even beyond that, Pavlovich, even Aspinall, again, bit biased being
no, that's a good shout. Yeah.
Almeida after his last victory over Rosenstruik. So there were fights there, but again, did it have the name value? And again, I'm always a big believer. If you have a dream, always try and chase it. And his dream, as you said, is to do boxing. When he first walked into an MMA gym, I think it was with Fernand. He said he wanted to box, and Fernand actually convinced him to do MMA, became the best fighter in the world in the heavyweight division. So again, why not pursue it? I think he should. I'm of the belief, and I might be wrong here, I might be just clutching at straws that I shouldn't be clutching at, but I believe he's going to fight someone in the PFL who currently isn't signed for the PFL. I think in his mind, he wants to box this year. I think then he'll take an MMA fight next year. And I think whoever he fights is someone who's not currently in the PFL. And that £2 million, or sorry, $2 million, I believe it might be for his opponent, I think is a massive, massive golden carrot to dangle. So I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm interested to see what happens with Jon Jones now. I mean, if Tyson Fury is silly enough to step in the octagon with Jon Jones, then it's going to be a very short night and a massive payday for Jones and for the UFC. I do want to ask you, though, is there one person you'd love to interview that you haven't interviewed yet?
You just mentioned him, Jon Jones.
You haven't yet?
It. No, that's the one that eludes me. I would love to, just because he's an all-time great, and I imagine he'd give good interviews as well. So yeah, that's the one. I don't know if I'm ever gonna get it, but that's the one.
Is he your GOAT?
Stay tuned, because we're I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but
okay.
Yeah, just stay tuned. I'm gonna say that.
Okay, cool. I don't want to get you into any trouble. He's one of mine. I've actually got a weird left field answer for this. My personal GOAT is Mighty Mouse. I think the GOAT is actually GSP, but my personal GOAT is Mighty Mouse. He's my favorite fighter of all time. I think he's phenomenal, and if I was ever a fighter, I'd want to be a fighter like Mighty Mouse. But Jon Jones is obviously phenomenal. Before I ask you some quick fire questions, I just want to ask one more question. I want to get into a bit of detail about, you obviously mentioned about UFC Fight Night in London being your first event. Out of all the events you've attended, which has been your favorite, and what's the reason behind it being your favorite?
Okay, I'm just gonna have to think about which one's my favorite. Like overall,
that's a good thing that you've got.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think like an overall, like the whole night. I'm trying to skim through. Man, I put me on the spot. I wish I had time to think about that. because I always think of like the mains and the co-mains, and that's like thinking of one particular fight, not an
Yeah.
entire event. But I'll think about it. Thing is, because because a lot of the events I've covered have been okay. Like they've been a bit like too. What's funny, 253, that had Cara France and Royval, right? I was at the back interviewing someone and I missed that, and I was so pissed off. That was the problem with doing those interviews at the back, that a lot of times I would have to side eye and look and try not to like watch while trying to interview somebody. So I actually missed that. 253 also had 253 was pretty good. I mean, if I actually watched Cara France and Royval, then that probably would have been there, because then you look at the last 3 fights. I'm trying to remember the rest of the event. 254 had that had Whitaker and Cannonier, right? Yeah, the main event was great. Yeah, I don't know. The fight night in London that had Paddy and Molly was a good one. The atmosphere there was pretty crazy. That was a good event. I actually maybe could say that one in terms of ones that I've attended. If you combine everything, the atmosphere and everything, I'd probably say that one.
Amazing. Right, before we let you go, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much. I have got 5 quick fire questions for you. Now, the rule with this is you can't spend any longer than 5 seconds giving
not like answer. I just did. Not like
So these are quick fire. I don't even want you to think about it. The first answer that comes to your mind, boom, let's go for it. All right. If the fight happens, who wins? Jones or Stipe?
Jones.
McGregor versus Chandler, who wins?
McGregor.
Okay. Sterling versus O'Malley?
Sterling.
Okay. Favorite fight you've watched, whether it be live or on TV?
Live or TV? Aldo Mendes too.
Oh, great fight. Great fight, actually. And finally, one fight that hasn't been made that you'd love to see get made?
Jones and Gunn.
Great. You're one of the best doing that, actually. Hoping to catch you out. You got that spot.
almost on that last one, but then it's a good thing we just spent some time talking about that. And Sterling O'Malley, I usually would have thought about it more, but I'm done underestimating Aljamain Sterling. Like I've reached the point where I just need to stop. So this is where I stop.
I mean, I think that's where he becomes dangerous, though, because the moment I ever stop underestimating a fight, that's when they tend
to
lose,
right. So I don't want to jinx him, but
yeah, I'm really looking forward to that fight. I think a lot of people are ruling out O'Malley winning that fight because he's not had the opposition or the test that Sterling's had. I think it could go. It's either going to be a complete shout out from O'Malley or a complete shout out for Sterling. I don't think we're going to see a back and forth, but I do think it'll be an entertaining fight when it happens.
Yeah, I think the thing with Sterling is that it's so hard to fight him. It's hard to look good against Aljamain Sterling. Yeah. Like very few people look good against him, and O'Malley usually looks good. He's in a flow state. He's a very like nice fighter to watch, and it's just hard to get into a flow state with Aljamain because he's so awkward. So that's what makes it interesting.
Completely agree. Well, Farah, before we let you go, where can the people find you and support you?
On the Twitter that I check on a regular basis. Well, yeah, on Twitter at just Farah _Hannoun, and then Instagram just Farah Hannoun, and then I still run my other Instagram page, UFC News Alerts, that I love. That's been hard to do while doing everything for MMA Junkie, but I still run that. So yeah, those are pretty much where you can find me.
Amazing. People, please do smash the like button. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, go and support Farah in the amazing work she's doing. Farah, from me, just want to say congratulations with all the success you've had. I pray to God you continue to have more success, and on a personal level, thank you so much for taking time out to do this. I'm greatly appreciative, and hopefully one day we can do this again as well.
Absolutely, anytime. Just let me know, and I will check, or just actually hit me up on Instagram. It's better.
Yeah, I will do. But no, you've been absolutely amazing. People, that's it for another Sit Down with Sanderson. Thanks so much for watching. Go and support Farah. Until we see you next time, take care, everyone.